I bet you've noticed you live in a world full of unique people. Have you ever thought about how boring it would be if everyone were the same? Because so much of life involves others around us, it's important to learn skills that help us to succeed with others. As a junior health educator, to be able to effectively convey health information to others, you need to be comfortable with who you are and what you have to offer. In this lesson, we are going to look at interpersonal communication, conflict management, including components of the JHE window, and basic cultural competency. The first thing we need to look at in talking about interpersonal communication is the most important person in the equation, you. Much of what makes us different is based on interpersonal communication, or basically what you think about yourself. It is not surprising we look to those around us as a source to find out about ourselves. Ultimately, though, what we think about ourselves impacts who we are to others. Who you really are, how you see yourself, how others see you, and what roles you play for different people in your life are all significant in making you, you. A couple of things really mold your self-concept as a child. One of the ways we form our self-image is through the looking glass self. That is, what you learn about yourself based on watching and analyzing how others react to you. From a very early age, language shapes the way you feel about yourself. Think about how dismayed a small child is if you scold them or tell them no in a gruff voice. Likewise, how excited they become when they are told they are a good artist or how pretty they look. As children get older, they tend to enjoy role play or make-believe since it allows them to practice reacting to different situations. The other major thing that affects our self-image is the accumulation of past experiences. All our experiences have a very personal meaning and/or feeling attached to them. Therefore, when we approach a new situation, we internally remember what happened the last time we were in a similar situation and how we felt about the reactions of others and ourselves. Think about how past comments may make you self-conscious, even though the circumstances might have changed. Like, a person who is made fun of for buck teeth or their weight as a child will always worry how their teeth look or how fat they appear, even if they had braces and lost all their weight. For this reason, you need to be careful teasing someone because you never know what they are thinking. For example, you jokingly call a thin person chubby because they are so thin. They may have been chubby as a child and start to worry they are gaining weight, which could spiral to eating disorders. You can see how what you think is a harmless joke could cause damage. Take a few minutes to think about your self-image and use your workbook to write down words that come to mind when you think about how others view you. Often you make choices of behavior today based on what went on in the past. This can work to your advantage or can be detrimental depending on your past experiences. This is the case of self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, this is how it works. Initially, we form certain expectations about people or events. We communicate those expectations in various cues, such as what we say and how we react. People tend to respond to those cues by adjusting their behavior to match the expectation. The result is that the original expectation becomes true. In one study, researchers selected random students from a class and told the teachers that those students would probably be better performers than the others. They found that the teachers labeled these students as bright when evaluated. They judged their performance in the same way and encouraged them to perform better. This resulted in the selected bright students performing at a higher level, at least in their own perception and the perception of the teachers. Likewise, this can also work the other way. If you assume someone is bad or worthless and they receive constant cues that this is true, then they will begin to believe the expectation and will behave accordingly. Think of a child who uses profanity frequently. As a child, adults may have laughed, thus encouraging the behavior to continue. Now that they are older, it still draws attention. For some people, it does not matter how, where, or what kind of attention they get, as long as they get it. When you are working with people in the community, it is important to keep this concept in the front of your mind. As we talked about earlier, someone who has been heavy most of their life will see themselves as heavy even if they have lost weight. When they have heard teasing, name-calling, and jokes for years, it takes a while to change their self-image based on new cues. Remember, keep positive cues positive. If you say something like, "That is ridiculous, I don't know why you think you're fat," it would be better to just say, "Hey, you're looking great." Although your comment about them thinking that they are being ridiculous is a joke to you, someone with a low self-image may take it seriously. There are a couple of noticeable cues that can help you understand a person's level of self-esteem. People with high self-esteem do not see themselves as perfect or better than others, but they tend to have a greater level of self-respect. They recognize their personal limitations and are content because they expect to be able to grow and improve. In comparison, people with low self-esteem tend to verbally and actively reject themselves. They are dissatisfied with themselves and may even hold themselves in contempt. Many do not like the person they see in relation to others and find this picture of themselves very disagreeable. Although they wish it were different, they may not have the confidence in making any changes. Low self-esteem can become a vicious cycle. When people have low self-esteem, they relate to others based on how they see themselves. In turn, people provide feedback based on their behavior that often reinforces their belief. The biggest message to take away from this section is that you are the only one who can do something about your self-communication. Therefore, it is important to evaluate regularly what you are telling yourself and how that relates to your interaction with others. Because we all have our own level of self-esteem, morals, beliefs, and cultural norms, tensions sometimes arise when people communicate. Even the closest friends and best coworkers will not agree on everything all the time. This is why it is important to learn conflict resolution skills. You may be thinking that the word conflict sounds a little harsh, especially between friends or coworkers, so let's call it tension instead. Tension refers to the wide range of reactions people may have to each other, ranging from very quiet and calm disagreements all the way to open aggressive battles. Surprisingly, conflict can have either destructive and/or positive outcomes. When the tension becomes so bad that people are focused just on the argument and lose focus on the issue, the constant fighting wears them out and their productivity decreases greatly. This can become very destructive to a relationship. Likewise, if tension causes people to discuss viewpoints in a constructive manner, then this can lead to innovation, creativity, or possibly change. This type of tension would be positive for the individuals and the organizations. Conflict is typically based on competing needs, desires, or values between two people. An example of this would be if both you and a sibling ask to use the car at the same time. She needs to go to the library to check out a book she's been waiting to read, and you want to run to the mall to pick up a pair of shoes that have gone on sale. There's really not time to do both this afternoon. Most of the time you would think your shoes are more important, especially since she can get the book anytime. And you'd be pretty mad if your parents gave her the car instead of you. After all, you are the oldest, and you need those shoes to go with an outfit you plan to wear tomorrow. She will obviously just have to use the car tomorrow, right? Although I'm sure you are thinking, I would never act that way. It gives you an example of personal conflict, and I am sure you can come up with plenty of examples in your own life. Stop and take a minute to think about the last conflict you had with a friend or family member. Use your workbook to list what it was about, a couple of details about what was said or done, and the outcome. Now that you have everything listed out, let's look at the 3 types of conflict management strategies and see which method you used in your last encounter. The first strategy is plain old avoidance. This strategy is often used whenever someone feels threatened or is afraid they won't be able to handle the conflict if it occurs. See if any of these avoidance techniques sound familiar. Denial. I never said that about you, they must be lying. Or suppression. If you don't tell her, then she won't ever know about it. Or maybe smoothing over. You're right, let's just forget about it. And if none of those work, then there is withdrawal. If I don't have to see him, then I won't have to deal with this. The thing to remember is that avoiding the situation is not likely to solve anything. In fact, the conflict may simply come back in another form. Unresolved conflict often allows feelings to build up over time, and you may end up with an extreme argument over something that would otherwise not have been a big deal. The second strategy is diffusion. You agree on some small point to calm the situation down, but the real issue goes unsettled. This technique can be helpful if you need to stall for time if people need to not only calm down, but to research facts, resources, information, or possible solutions. The last of the strategies is confrontation. The mere word makes you have a reaction. Most of us try our best not to use this strategy, but did you know there are 3 different sub-strategies within this category? Which of these subgroups you use depends greatly on what you want for an outcome. The first of this group is the win-lose or power strategy. This is the most common way of addressing conflict and is based on the notion that someone must win for the conflict to be resolved. thus, this can only happen if the other side loses. One example you may have heard is, because I'm your parent and I said so. This almost always shuts down any creative problem solving and will cause a loser to feel bitterness and resentment. You need to be careful with this type of conflict resolution, since many times the loser waits for their chance to get even in future situations when they have the power. The next strategy is the lose-lose or concession method. In the lose-lose scenario, both parties give up something and settle on middle ground, which neither wants, but it's just to make sure the other person doesn't get what they want either. You are willing to do about anything to keep them from winning. I can't tell you how many times my mom has said, "Don't cut off your nose to spite your face." Meaning, don't do something you would not usually do just to get at someone else. You may have heard this or something like, "If you don't let me go, I won't let you use my car." Or, "If you don't let me pitch, then I'm going to take my ball and go home." This can be effective sometimes, but can become a habit. If you never actually work anything out, you will never learn to take turns or negotiate differences, and both sides come up short of what they could obtain together. Probably the most productive, but least used technique is the win-win or integration strategy. It is based on two ideas. First, conflict is a piece of a problem to be solved rather than a fight to win. And second, that conflict can be worked out so that no one has to lose completely. You look at the issue as a we, and not as an us and them. This is not a cure-all, but does offer a gateway to compromises. By using this method, the worst that could happen is that you have a better understanding of each other's positions and why you think the way you do. At best, you come up with a great solution involving both parties. You also gain greater trust, understanding, and respect for each other. This may take more time to work out, but parties tend to be more committed to live up to the agreement if it was reached by the win-win technique. Let's take a look at a couple of components of the JHE window model to see how to build a relationship that fosters win-win encounters. The JHE window is a classic model used to describe your relationship with people or groups around you in terms of how much you and they know and are willing to share in an effort to reduce misunderstandings and tension. Two important parts of this model are exchanging accurate and timely feedback from others and disclosing information, which will help others understand and work with you better. Feedback, both verbal and nonverbal, lets you know how you are doing in the eyes of others. We often need this feedback so that we can adjust our behavior if needed. You also have a better understanding of how you are doing and how you are affecting others around you. When you interact with others, it is important to model good feedback techniques by focusing on key suggestions. You want to focus on the behavior, not the person. Thus, saying, "When you interrupt others, they are not getting to express their thoughts. Please respect their turn," will work much better than "Shut up, big mouth." Focus on observations, not assumptions. For example, "I have noticed that you are talking very fast. Are you nervous?" is better than, "Man, I don't think I've ever seen anyone talk that fast unless they were on something." In addition, focus on descriptions, not judgments, like, "I've noticed that you are very thin," not, "Are you anorexic or what?" Share ideas rather than give advice. "Have you thought about going to trade school or possibly the military as an alternative?" Not, "If I had your grades, I would join the Army ASAP." And finally, focus on what your feedback may do to the person who is receiving it more than your need to speak out. Even when someone has gotten on your last nerve, you need to step back and think about how you can use these suggestions to get across what you want them to know without being negative. Think about how you would feel and react if someone said the same thing to you. People are much more likely to listen to what you have to say if it is said in a constructive manner. When giving and receiving feedback, it can also be helpful to use a technique called feed forward. This device lets others know how you hope the rest of the conversation, debate, or negotiation is likely to go. It helps to set some rules in advance about the limits of your interactions. It might sound something like this. "I would like each group to state the facts as they see them without interruption, and then we'll begin a friendly discussion of similarities and differences to work towards a possible solution. If this is not possible, then we will reschedule this meeting at a later date once the groups have calmed down." This sets the expectation as well as the possible consequence. Another component of the JHE window is disclosure. This term usually describes what passes between you and another. Self-disclosure relates to giving personal information and can be very risky. It can also be very rewarding if you follow a couple of rules. Here are the top 8 scenarios in which you might want to disclose. Number 8. When you have a relationship with a person, not just an isolated incident unrelated to your future or past. If you know someone well, they will already know something about you, so disclosing additional information or details may make sense. Many people violate this rule. I bet you know someone that tells everyone their life story, including all the nitty-gritty details, right after they meet them. This isn't a good idea and will probably make many people very uncomfortable. Number 7. When the other person is willing to disclose information. If disclosure is always one-sided, you need to ask yourself if you really know this person well enough to be spilling your guts, or if there is a reason they are not also disclosing information. Look at whether you have given them the chance to provide you with information. Number 6. When self-disclosure is really about what is currently going on between you and the other person. You want to make sure you stay in the present and not bring up the past. It may be tempting to bring up past relationships or feelings that you have been saving up from past experiences and dumping them on the other person at this time, but that would not be productive. Number 5. When self-disclosure leads to improving your relationship. Imagine, let's say you had a problem with your weight as a young kid and it still brings back painful memories. Now imagine you are at the movies with your best friend and she's laughing and making fun of a heavy child. If you disclose how you felt as a child who was considered chubby and how much pain comments like that cause you, then she will understand those comments are harmful and will not do it again. Number 4. When self-disclosure is about just positive or both positive and negative things. Often if you focus only on negative things about yourself, people are going to consider you poorly adjusted or depressing. Think about someone you may have run into in life that has nothing but negative things to say about themselves and others. I am such a failure, and I can't get anything right, everyone hates me, etc. Likewise, if someone only focuses on what they do well and ignore things they may not do well, people will begin to see them as conceited. You don't want to avoid negative comments, but shoot for a balance of sharing both positive and negative information. Number 3. When you are sensitive to what effect self-disclosure will have on the other person. There are 2 sides to this coin. You need to make sure comments you may make will not hurt the other person's feelings or make them want to smack you. An example would be for the girl mentioned earlier to reply to her friend, "Too bad for you, I have always been able to eat whatever I want without gaining a pound." The other side of the coin is making sure you do not make others responsible for all your issues. Search your mental friend list and think of someone who depends on you to fix everything. They may say things like, "I don't know what I would do without you. I could not make it if you weren't here to help." This puts a lot of pressure on the relationship and is not healthy. Number 2, when self-disclosure is gradual or a little at a time. If you dump too much information on a person at one time, it can be too much to handle. Let's say you have an abusive home life. If you start by disclosing the family violence, that is enough by itself to digest. But if you go on to give the full history with all the details, it would be overwhelming and way too much to handle. As you begin to disclose bits and pieces, assess how they are responding to see if you should continue to disclose in the future. And finally, number 1. When you trust the other person and you feel like they trust you. Disclosure of personal information is a risk. You don't want what you share to come back and bite you in the behind. If you have reason to not trust or just flat don't trust the person you are talking to, then do not disclose any information you would not be willing to put on a billboard, just in case. Okay, now think back to what you wrote down earlier about your last argument or conflict. What type of conflict resolution techniques did you use? Was the person you were fighting with trying to use a different technique? How do you think you could use what you have learned to resolve a similar issue? Take a few minutes to think through how you would answer these questions. I'm sure you'll be dazzling your friends and family with your new skills in no time. They are often the easiest to impress since they share so much in common with us. We typically have similar beliefs, morals, family values, and cultural backgrounds with those we know, and thus see things in a similar way. Even if you don't see eye to eye, you have an idea as to why they think the way they do. Now imagine if you were placed in another part of the world to educate or train people on health-related life-saving skills. Do you think this would be hard or easy? If they completely rejected what you were teaching, would you have a clue as to why? Probably not. Let's look at how to work with diverse groups of people both appropriately and respectfully. One of the easiest ways to start an interaction with a group, especially one that is diverse or multicultural, is by setting up ground rules. It's important for the entire group to participate when you create and agree upon these rules. This allows the group to develop norms and set up an environment where everyone feels comfortable. Once the group agrees on the ground rules, you need to make sure everyone has a copy or they are displayed in a visible location. Here is an example of what it would look like. We agree to share information about our groups and learn from others. Be respectful of how others want to be treated. No one will put down others or make jokes at the expense of others. Give everyone a chance to speak and not dominate the discussion. Not tolerate stereotypes. Keep the discussion confidential and respect personal privacy. Treat all ideas and emotions with respect. One person speaks at a time, no interrupting. Not blame, accuse, or make generalizations. Disagree as long as nobody's feelings are hurt. Treat people as an individual, not representative of an entire group. And respect people's uniqueness and difference. It is much easier to get a group back under control after there was a heated discussion when you have a set of rules that have been created and agreed to by the group. If things start to get out of hand, you can use a statement like, "Sir, I understand that you may be upset, but we have all agreed that we will not blame, accuse, or make generalizations in this group." This needs to be said in a non-threatening tone, and it doesn't hurt to point to the ground rule that it applies to. You have acknowledged his feelings, but reminded him that he is a part of the we that agreed to the rules of conduct. Now let's take a look at what cultural competency is and why it is important to understand it. What do you think of when you hear the word cultural competency? Take a little time to write down in your workbook what comes to mind. Was that easy for you or difficult for you? You hear so many things floating around about what it actually encompasses. Cultural competency is defined as a set of congruent behaviors, attitudes, and policies that come together on a continuum in a system, agency, or individual to function effectively in transcultural interactions. Huh? Basically, it is the capacity, knowledge, and skill to respond appropriately to the unique needs of people whose cultures are different than yours, using the values, attitudes, and beliefs of each individual. This can occur at both the individual and/or organizational level. It is important to be able to function in a cross-cultural situation with individuals you regularly come into contact with, as well as outside of your normal circle. This is everyone's responsibility. A culturally competent group values diversity, conducts cultural self-assessments, is aware of differences, institutionalizes cultural knowledge, and adapts services to fit the individual or the community served. When you are working with individuals or groups, remember the following saying: "Don't do anything for me without me." If you truly want to make a difference, it is important to include them in the process. To be effective at this principle, we really need to start by examining our own biases and prejudices towards other cultures. We need to first understand our own values, beliefs, and attitudes before we can have culturally competent interactions with others. As you listen to the following story, remember to think about how other cultures might react to the situation. Would their social norms, religion, or cultural beliefs have anything to do with how they answer the question? Imagine, if you will, there was a terrible storm on the high seas and a large sailboat capsized and sank. The boat had 3 surviving passengers, a woman and her fiancé and his best friend. The problem was the woman washed ashore on a different island than the other 2. It was pitiful. She could wave, yell sweet remarks, and blow kisses at her love, but she could not get to his island due to the sharks that circled the waves. This went on for several years. She was getting desperate and felt like she couldn't live any longer without her true love when suddenly she sees a boat come into the harbor. a lonely pirate comes ashore and is surprised to see her. She explains what has happened and that her love is on the next island. The woman begged the pirate to take her to her fiancé as soon as possible. The pirate, being a pirate, said sure, but he wanted something out of the deal. He was so lonely, and it had been so long since he had been around anyone, much less a female, that he decided that for her transportation, she would have to cook him a wonderful meal, talk about whatever he wanted, and at the end of the day, give him a passionate kiss. Well, she explained that the first two things would not be a problem, but she was, after all, engaged, so the kiss was out. He countered with, "That's the deal. Take it or leave it, but I sail tomorrow." The woman agonized over what to do all night. She knew it was wrong, not to mention gross, to kiss the pirate since she was engaged, but could not see any other way to get to her true love. After much deliberation, she decided that her fiancé would understand the sacrifice that she had made and agreed to the pirate's terms. True to her word, they had a wonderful meal and discussed whatever topic he chose, and then ended the night with a passionate kiss, followed by lots of gargling and toothbrushing. The next day, the pirate sailed the woman over to the next island where she was reunited with her love. He was very glad to see her, but when she explained what she had to do to get the pirate to help, he slapped her, told her he did not ever want to see her again, and moved his hut to the other side of the island. Well, the woman was grief-stricken and crying loudly when the ex-fiancé's friend shows up and asks what was going on. She explains all that has happened, and he immediately goes to the other side of the island and blacks both his friend's eyes for being a jerk. Now, in your workbook, rank the 4 characters, the woman, the fiancé, the pirate, and the friend, in order from 1, the best, to 4, the worst, based on how you view them. How did you rank them? Who did you put as the best? The worst? What did you base your decision on? How you look at this scenario is based largely on a complex system of learned responses that you have picked up over your lifetime. This includes what you were taught as a child, what you observe to be the norm in your culture, and opinions you have gained from past experiences. You probably think there is a correct answer to the rank, and it matches yours. Well, you may be surprised to know that there is no right or wrong ranking, just different ways of looking at the same situation. Some may see the woman as the best because she made a great sacrifice to be with the one she loved and should be valued for doing so. Vice versa, in some cultures, she would be stoned to death for kissing another man. Some cultures would think the fiancé is the best for standing up for his beliefs no matter why she did what she did and was justified in his behavior. Others may scream he is a jerk and/or abusive. The friend could be seen as taking up for the underdog and defending the damsel in distress, or a bully who betrays his friend. Lastly, you may see the pirate as someone who took advantage of a woman in trouble, or a businessman who offered a service for a fee and fulfilled his obligation. My explaining rationale for how others might have ranked the group may not have changed your ranking, but it is important to realize that there are other rankings that may be just as valid. Think, I don't agree, but can see how you might think that. Even if you can't see how they could think that, you need to be aware that is how they see the world when interacting with them, and make sure your communication respects their beliefs. Okay, this lesson we have looked at cultural competency and how it affects our view of the world. Everyone the world over has the same basic needs. We just go about meeting those needs differently based on our own unique traditions, beliefs, and customs. In our example, I'm sure the pirate thought he was being perfectly reasonable based on what he had learned on his father's ship as a child. Remember, it is not possible to learn all there is to know about every ethnic or cultural group, but the best way to start is to respectfully ask, talk, and listen. Now that we have learned more about the essentials of communication and interpersonal skills, you can see how they relate to just about every aspect of your daily interactions. In the next lesson, we'll be talking about something for which interpersonal skills are key: service coordination. Now, please take a minute to show us what you've learned. After you successfully complete these questions, you'll be able to move on to the next lesson.